Hey everybody, I'm here today with my good friend Jon Flagg. Jon is a thinker, an author, an entrepreneur, and we're talking about this idea of old earth, new earth, and today's thoughts are really going to challenge you as they did me. Take some notes, maybe get a Bible, read along with us. It's going to be great. Jon Flagg, welcome, man. I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We have, I've been looking forward to this for a while because I really love the way that you approach study. You really know your stuff. We have great conversations, and it can be shocking to people within the church world because you and I are independent thinkers.
Yeah.
And I really respect that about you. It's interestingly too that there's an area of focus that a couple areas of focus that you have that I really love to glean from and learn from. So I've just been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here too. I love this topic, so I'm excited to get started.
Oh man, let's get into it. What do you have for us today, man? What you got?
Well, today we're talking about young Earth,
Yeah.
versus old Earth creationism.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll hear people call it the new Earth as well. So
Yeah.
new Earth, young Earth creationism, old Earth creationism, and we'll even get into a little bit of gap theory.
Gap theory. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is gap theory for the layman? Like, talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old.
Sure.
I'm
Maybe
just
we'll
kidding.
go through all three of them, right? So
That was a Michael Scott reference, by the way.
Love that show. So, young Earth. It's a literal. So if you take the foundation of Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. 4 days later, He creates mankind, and then we have Adam and Eve. And if you just take the genealogy of Adam and Eve through Jesus, you've got give or take 4,000 years. Takes us to about 32, 33 A.D. And then of course now we are at 2023, so it's about 2,000 years, and that's where people come up with this. The Earth is 6,000 years old. So that's in general what the New Earth creationist or the Young Earth creationist believe. They believe the 7 days or 6 days of creation, if you will, are literal 24-hour days. And some of the challenges, of course, gets faced when we start talking about fossil finds that science has come up with. So that's kind of the challenges of the Young Earth theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the Old Earth theory, not gap yet, but just the Old Earth theory, which says that those 6 days of creation, because the sun and the moon wasn't even created yet, those first day could be billions of years, right? And so we kind of line up with science. If science says the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, well, we can get there because a day is not as we consider a day in that old Earth kind of viewpoint. So they'll face, that scripture where the 1 day is of 1,000 years, that kind of thing, right? So we can go there, and that's where they come up with their theory. Now there's some challenges in that as well. And then we have this third one, which is old Earth creationism with the gap theory. And so the gap theory says that, yes, we do believe that the 6 days of creation are 24-hour days. But right between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there's a gap of time that has existed. And it was kind of that world where Lucifer reigned as the ruler of the earth, and all kind of stuff happened. And I'm sure we'll get into it today. But that gap can be as long as we want. And so the earth can be, in fact, 4.5 billion years, and we can still have the 24-hour days of what then becomes the recreation story in Genesis. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the three theories. They all have their pluses and minuses, and I'm sure we'll go through all that.
So the recreation story in Genesis is Genesis 1, is Genesis 2, or is it Genesis 1 and verse 2? Because if you look at Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there's a lot of theologians who believe those are two separate creation accounts. It's not them just rehashing the original creation account, right?
I can't speak to that. I just know that, where Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Right, and there's the gap. And then we go on with the 6 days of creation.
Oh, okay. So the 6 days of creation, you're saying, are the recreation when you use that word?
In the gap theory, that's a recreation going
on.
on when God says, let there be light. Well, that's a recreation of what had already existed in that world that Lucifer ruled over, which we call the pre-Adamic world.
Yes.
Which is the gap.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, to me, yes. and there's a lot of reasons that make sense to me. I remember coming across this topic in college. We had to really formulate what we believed and argue about it. It was a liberal arts college, and it was really good. It was really healthy for me. And the main belief in that college was that God created an old earth new, a new earth old, if that makes sense. So, he creates it. It's a literal 6,000 years, but the main belief was Adam was mature when he created him. So therefore the earth would have been mature when he created it as well, carrying on the 4.5 billion years of history, if that makes sense. So you differentiate, you differ from that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I'd have to get a lot more detail on that, but probably would.
Yeah. Well, I don't know many more details than that.
Fair enough.
So how did you come across this? Like what sparked your interest in this topic?
Sure. So just real briefly, I was most of my life an agnostic. And then I had this experience with God. It was amazing. And so I know that God is real, but now I have this Bible that I didn't believe in. And I had to square this all up in my head. I didn't believe the Earth was 6,000 years old. But in my college days, I did, radiocarbon dating. I understand how dating works. And I've done it. So I know it's real. And I know the Earth is not 6,000 years old.
You did that?
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before. What was your major in college? Did you do that as part of science?
Yeah, I'm a material science engineer.
Material science engineer.
Yeah,
okay.
So I did a lot of that.
Where did you go to school?
Virginia Tech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so I'm like, I'm on a journey now. Like, I believe in God. I know God's real. This is amazing. But this Bible thing, it's kind of confusing. This Bible's telling me the Earth is 6,000 years old, but my science is telling me it's not. And, even as a brand new Christian, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If science should be trying to discover what God already put in place, right? When you see science going this way and the Bible going this way, we got a problem. And it's either the science is wrong or our interpretation of the Bible is wrong, right? They should always be lockstep together because it literally is science is already about God's laws. So obviously in this 6,000 year versus 4.5 billion, we've got a pretty big divide, right? So I'm diving into trying to understand where this differentiation is coming from. And so I did go talk to a pastor who's now my spiritual father, and he kind of just got me on the path. Give me a couple little. He's one of these guys I just love. He's not going to give you the answer. He's going to give you the tools to go find the answer for yourself. Yeah. And I just find that so incredible. Do the research ourselves and find the truth yourselves, and then you go to these other resources and you start finding out, whether you're accurate or not.
John, I want to ask, why do you think most people don't do that? I mean, that's the point of why we're doing this, is to inspire people to research and to read and to know not what they believe, but why they believe it. So I don't know, maybe you could speak to that.
I mean, I think there's probably people a lot smarter than me on this subject, but obviously there's time. We don't have the time to do it. We don't want to put the effort in. Maybe our faith is to the point we really don't care. Or maybe we're just groupthink, we're stuck in Reddit or TikTok and we just don't care.
Yeah. We kind of get our tribe and exactly. Sit there.
Yeah. So I don't know anything better than that, but
if somebody comes to you and says, well, somebody told me this, that therefore I believe it, what does that do in your mind?
Yeah. The first thing I think of, well, have you double checked the work?
Yeah.
Why do you believe it? I just don't take anything people say. There's a trust factor, right? If you were to tell me something, I would believe it because I trust you. But there's other people, I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I'm going to research it myself if it's a subject that I care enough about. That might be the problem. Maybe it's the subjects we just don't care enough about. Right.
And there is the possibility of certain individuals being very schooled in one subject, not schooled in another. And because they change your life in one area or they speak a truth that makes sense, you're just like, oh, well, I believe everything they say. Yeah. I try not to be that way. Yeah. I have to be a general practitioner pointing people in the right direction. And so Dr. Richards, I know that man, he's a good man, pointed you to do your own research. What did he give you? What research or how did he point you in that direction?
Yeah, well, the conversation actually started about aliens, which is kind of humorous, but
we have to talk about this stuff, though. We have to.
I asked him. I said, "Hey, if we find aliens for real,
it's
for real, right?
People are asking that now.
Sentient race out in space that flies around spaceships. What are they? Because the Bible's. Let's just say our theology gets a little dicey if there's another sentient race out there, right? Mm-hmm. Who's Jesus for them, or are they sinless creation? What is it? Really starts getting interesting, right?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of way I think, right? So
I love that.
You can see me having this conversation with Dr. Richards, and he just said, "Hey, you need to know about the pre-Adamic world." And I'm like, "What is this pre-Adamic world thing? I don't even know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, go find out. Start off with there's a gentleman, I think it was from the 1930s. That name is Finis Dake." He has Dake study notes on the whole King James Bible. And never heard of the guy, didn't know anything about the guy. So I bought the Dake study guide and started reading it, trying to find out who Dake is, and kind of just one step led to another, and then started to find out, Dake laid it out pretty well, but I had to figure it out myself. So I started doing my own research beyond Dake and reading the Bible and really looking at the word searches and breaking out the Strong's Concordance and really seeing the definition. I should say, Strong Concordance, right, is a way for the Hebrew or Greek, for most part, of the Bible. It's a way for us to see a further expanded definition of a word. We may choose the word was in the Bible, but it may be something so much bigger than that.
Right.
So the Strong's Concordance is a way of looking at the actual Hebrew in the Old Testament or the Greek in the New Testament and see what the broader definition might be. Mm-hmm. And so I started learning how the Strong's Concordance worked, and one thing led to another, and here we are years later. And I don't pretend to be the most educated on this subject at all, but I am fairly well versed on it, and I love it.
Yeah. And so you kept going with this, with gap theory.
I didn't know gap theory was a theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my own mind, as I went through all these scriptures that we're going to go through today, I'm like, there's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2.
Yeah.
Dake talked about it. I didn't know if it was right or wrong. Everybody around me at the time, by the way, every Christian I knew was like, you're insane.
Yeah.
It's a 6,000-year earth, and you're crazy, and you're being deceived, and I'm like, I don't think so. And so just kept researching it, and to me, everything that this Finis Dake gentleman talked about came to be. Like, you really research it, you're like, my gosh, there was absolutely a gap in there.
Yeah.
And I think I can prove it out to you scripturally today.
So, yeah, let's do it. So what is Genesis 1:1, Genesis 1:2?
We're going to actually start in 2 Peter of all places.
2 Peter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So we're going to go to 2 Peter. I was going to start us at 4, but I think I'm going to back us up. We're going to start at 3.
Okay.
Because this scripture, the more I read it, the more I'm just like, wow, my mind is blown by this scripture. And at first glance, you're like, huh? But when we talk about it, I think we'll see how powerful this scripture is. So we got to start off 2 Peter. It's Peter's talking to believers. And so I'll skip the first couple verses, but he says, knowing this first, this is Peter's first thing in his letter, knowing this first, there shall come in the last days scoffers, right? Walking after their own lusts, and they say, where is the promise of his coming? So he's talking about the Messiah. Okay, so these scoffers in the last days are going to say, where is the promise of the Messiah's coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continued as they were from the beginning of creation. So from the beginning of creation, nothing's changed. So we have these scoffers in the end of days coming out saying all these things. There's no Messiah. Everything's been the same since the very beginning. So Peter continues. Now he's going to defeat that argument right off the bat here. For this, these scoffers, they willingly are ignorant, so they are purposefully not getting knowledge. Right? It's kind of something we were just talking about. For this, they are willingly ignorant of that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. Interesting, we'll come back to that. Whereby the world that was then, now Peter's going to start laying out what we call dispensationalism. He's going to talk about the world that was then and the world that is now. So when you hear people talk about dispensational, this is kind of one of them, all right? So for they are willingly ignorant that by the word of God, the heavens of old and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that was then, being overflowed by water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved for fire against the day of judgment, against perdition of ungodly men. We don't need to get into that. But he basically says there's a world that was then, that was overflowed by water, it perished. And there's a world that is now, that is reserved for judgment of fire because of ungodly people. So, first thing is, it's Noah's flood, right? A world that was in, overflowed by water, it's Noah's flood. Okay, first we got to define world. So the world is the word cosmos. And so we already know cosmos, like we use that word, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the world system, it's the creation, it's the inhabitants of creation. It's a broad word. It's like the world system. So Peter's saying the world system that was then perished. Well, okay, if we go to Noah's flood, the animals didn't perish. They're on the ark. So the animals that existed before the flood are the same animals that existed after the flood. There's just less of them, right? Mankind before the flood existed, after Noah's flood. They certainly still existed because Noah was there with his family and they repopulate the earth. And I hate to say this may be one of those sacred cows that we may be possibly putting a gun up to, but that bird in the Noah's flood, right? He lets go a dove. She flies around for a week, comes back. She can't find any place to put her feet. And he lets her out a week later, and she comes back with an olive branch. Well, that means olive trees. By the way, the germination period of an olive tree is like 1 to 2 months, right? So I highly doubt this is a new olive tree. So did the entire earth flood? I don't know. Again, it's one of those areas I'm not very dogmatic on. I have no idea. But the Bible's clear. There was olive trees before the flood, and there's olive trees after the flood. So how did that world perish? 2 Peter is not talking about Noah's flood.
Wow.
So the question then is, if this cosmos perished in the world that was then, what the heck world is he talking about?
Why did I never think of that before? The germination period of an olive tree is 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, it varies, of course, but yeah,
Right.
It's long. It's a long time.
Not 7 days.
It's not 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So, again, we can debate whether the land really was destroyed. Was it the entire earth that was flooded? I have no idea. I don't really care. It's hard for me to envision. We have Mount Everest at 29,000 feet. So the water went up 29,000 feet. And what's the temperature for Noah on the ark? Like, there's a lot of stuff I just don't know, Lord. And I really don't care either.
I saw a scientist one time describing Mount Everest and saying there were live clams, or there were clamshells found on Mount Everest. And the description of that was after the flood, the crust of the earth had so much pressure and moved upward and created Mount Everest. I don't know the validity of that. I haven't studied that, but
yeah, the counter argument would be that just 2 tectonic plates did this, and what used to be under the ocean came up.
Right.
That's the more scientific version of that. So who knows?
Right. But that's fascinating. It's not the earth is completely destroyed in the flood. That's fascinating to me.
Again, I'm not saying that's true. Like, I'm not trying to spread disinformation here. I do not know.
Well, it goes back to modern science is finding there have been floods. Like, it is very evident.
Yes.
That there are. I mean, you can look in Washington State and you can see clearly this area was flooded. This is not just glaciers getting pulled up and slowly eroding. This was a massive cataclysmic flood. Every religion, I think, that I know of talks about a flood. Every nation has. So the earth being completely destroyed. I mean, we can even get into the Nephilim at that point. I mean, how did the Nephilim even survive? Then, it's fascinating.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can definitely go down that path.
I mean, we don't need to do that, but we'll keep on topic.
The key here is...
It makes sense. That's what I'm saying.
Cosmos, it's saying this cosmos was perished, right?
Yeah.
And that is not the case with Noah's flood, because Noah's flood, there was a lot of damage. A lot of stuff was destroyed. Whether the land was completely wiped out or not, I don't know, but the animals certainly survived and the people certainly survived. You cannot say the cosmos perished. So what did perish? And so if 2 Peter, the scripture here is like, it's like a bow and arrow, and it's shooting its arrow all the way from we're at the far right side of the Bible, and it's shooting it all the way to the left side of the Bible, and we're landing right between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Now, so that arrow lands, you're like, okay, so here's this John guy saying there's some devastation. But I thought this was like the creation of this primordial earth. If you're an old earther, right, you're like, oh, yeah, that's earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Oh, it's this primordial earth that just was formed. Gravity's pulling everything together, and earth is now a ball and ready for God to plant life on it or whatever, right? The New Earth people, I don't know what they do to kind of justify this, because I'm like, does God's creative character seem like he would make something void and without form and dark? Doesn't seem like his creative character, does it? My Bible says God is light, right? And there's no shadow of turning, so I would even create the earth to be dark. And so we're going to get into the Strong's Concordance on what those 3 words actually mean.
Oh, fantastic.
Because it's fascinating, right? But this is one of those challenges I have to this young earth creationist account.
Yeah.
Why would God create the earth to be void, without form, and dark? And I really challenge some theology on this one. In this case, darkness precedes the light. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Then God follows on day 1 and says, let there be light. So you're telling me our powerful, amazing, omnipotent God let the darkness precede the light. That makes no sense theologically whatsoever, right? So I'm like, okay, something's going on here. Let's get into it. The earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face deep. The very first word we're going to look at is was. So I'm not going to make a doctrine on this, but a lot of Hebrew experts say the actual word is not was, is had become or became.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my car was red, my car became red. They're two different things, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, so a lot of people believe that's the actual verbiage there is, and the earth became without form and void, and darkness covered the face of deep. Now, I'm not a Hebrew expert, so I'm just like, cool, all right, I'll just put that in my back of my mind, because I'm like, yeah, it sounds really good, but I'm not making a doctrine on that. I have no idea. But what I do know is the Strong's Concordance on these three words.
I'm pulling up my Bible, man. I just want to read along with you on this. Keep going.
Okay. So, again, I'm going to encourage everybody listening to us today, go to your app store or Google store, whatever. I don't use Google, but there's a thing called Strong's Concordance. Strong, like I'm strong.
Oh, you an Apple guy?
I'm an Apple guy.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
don't make fun of me. Don't make fun of me.
So it's called Strong's Concordance, like a Concord grape. Strong's Concordance. Get it. It's free, and you can see there's a link to every single one of these Hebrew words for you. Please just validate what I'm telling you on this podcast. If you're listening, look it up yourself. It's free. It'll take you 2 seconds. So the very first word is, and the earth was without form. The word is tohu.
Okay.
And when you pull up your Strong's Concordance and start looking at this more broader definition of what it means, these are other ways this is translated in the Bible. Vain, vanity, without form, obviously. Wilderness, an empty place, a waste. It's a desolation of surface, a desert. Does God create his most important planet where he's going to put human beings in a wasteland, a desolation, a place of naught? It doesn't make any sense. Let's go on to the next word. Earth was without form and void. Void is bohu. It means void, emptiness, a vacuity, an indistinguishable ruin. Now that's interesting. So God creates the earth to be a vain wasteland, an indistinguishable ruin. That really doesn't make any sense. And the third word, darkness, is koshek. Koshek means misery, destruction, death, wickedness, and sorrow. Okay, so if you're following along, you're like, wait a second. What I believe maybe was like, this is that primordial earth was created by God. It was definitely not. These three words clearly make it, make us understand that something happened. God did not create the earth to be dark, full of death, an indistinguishable ruin, a wasteland, a desert, covered by water. It makes no sense whatsoever. So this is where the gap theory comes in. And so between Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heaven and the earth. It was perfect. It was full of light. It was full of God's spirit. I'm sure it was amazing. Animals. Okay, here's some things we're going to get into. Animals, people, Lucifer. Yeah, they're all in there, and I can kind of show you to you scripturally. Something happened. We know about Lucifer's fall. The Bible talks about it. And so this world somehow ends, and then we re-begin in Genesis. So that's Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face. It was this destruction. Something really bad happened. And then we go now into the story of recreation, where God recreates the earth as we know it today. And so it's pretty clear when Peter talks about the cosmos that was then perished. I can't prove this God didn't say yes, you were 100% correct, but it sure looks to me like that arrow landed right between 1:1, Genesis 1:1, Genesis 1:2. That's where that arrow lands. That cosmos that was then perished, we call it the pre-Adamic world. It perished, and then God starts over again. And the thing that biblical scholars, I'm sure Dake wasn't the first one, but they come up with it, but they believe that world ended with Lucifer's flood.
Yeah.
So the belief is that there was not just Noah's flood, but there's also Lucifer's flood, and it wiped out that entire pre-Adamic world. And the Bible is pretty clear that there was multiple floods.
Wow. I've never looked at the word was before. You know why? Because it's the word was.
Yeah, why would you?
Yeah. But it is clearly came to pass, occurred, happened to become, it became void.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Wow.
So this is the basis of the gap theory.
Yeah.
So we have an old Earth with a gap. And so in here, in this pre-Adamic world, we have dinosaurs, we have Neanderthal man, we have whatever we have, right? Whatever scientific fossils we find, nothing goes against biblical accounts. God didn't give us specific details on this. I've heard some people challenging the gap theory because it's like, well, God didn't tell us in the beginning. God created heaven and the earth. And then this really bad stuff happened with Lucifer, and he killed it all, and he started over again. Like, but God's God. He doesn't have to tell us things the way we want him to tell us, right?
Yeah.
So this gap theory, to me, it answers all the questions. We can go, if the earth is 4.56 billion years old, great. I have no problem with that. If there was a Big Bang, great. In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. Big Bang, great, no problem. The earth was without form and void, darkness covered face deep us, because there was 4.5 billion years of rule by Lucifer in this pre-Adamic world that had animals, it had dinosaurs, it had people, it had cities. Jeremiah talks about the cities, and they were all wiped out during Lucifer's flood. And then God says, "Let there be light." It's not physical light, right? Because the sun is not in the creation story. The sun is not till later, even though the sun's already there. I believe we have is just total darkness from this massive devastation of this planet. Something really bad. The entire cosmos, right, is wiped out, perished. And then God says, "Okay, let there be light." That's his presence in my mind. And so his presence comes back into this world, and now we go with the recreation story, and we begin again.
Well, this is fascinating. There's a lot of science right now that is catching up to this, like in universities all over. People are talking about what's called the Younger Dryas theory. We've talked about that a little bit here and there, but it is the floods, multiple floods. And I've actually been listening to that science. It's so compelling. I've done research on it, and I haven't been able to reconcile there being multiple floods like you're talking about until seeing the possibilities, like the theory of this.
So let's go to, just because we're talking about the flood, let's go to Psalm 104, verse 6 through 9. So I've got the King James. I'll read it out loud. So it's kind of
Is King James the only Bible that you read?
No, I'm just being super lazy, and it's my copy and paste version, so it's super easy. So Psalm 104. So picture the Noah story before we get into this. So Noah's, the flood, and it takes hundreds of days, right? I think it's 300 days before the flood begins, and they're able to come off onto dry land, somewhere around 300 days. So it's this really slow process of the water slowly receding from this flood, right? Let's go to Psalm 104. Thou coverest with the deep. I love the Old English. Thou coverest with the deep as with a garment. The water stood above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the voice of thy thunder they hastened away. They go up by the mountains. They go down by the valleys unto the place which thou hast founded for them. Does the slow receding of water of Noah's flood sound like God's rebuke? They fled.
No, that sounds like Genesis 1.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So this is talk about a different flood where these waters were immediately hastened away, whereas Noah's flood, he slowly receded naturally.
Okay.
Good stuff, huh?
How have I never seen that before, John?
Well,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this is where, again, we can't 100% confirm this, right? But this is the thought that, okay, this is now talking about Lucifer's flood. This flood covered the mountains.
Well, how does Lucifer get into
everything.
All of this? Like, how does it turn into Lucifer's flood, though?
Right.
So, Genesis 1:1 and 1:2.
Right. So we know in Ezekiel 14 and Isaiah 28, there's this cherub named Lucifer, and he's the cherub that covereth. In the Old English, of course, and it means protector. So Lucifer, again, there might be some people who challenge this theologically, but I think this is kind of mainstream at this point, that Lucifer was an archangel, and through whatever mechanism, God placed him as the protector of Earth. And it says he has a throne. So thrones have rulers, and so Lucifer was certainly put in charge of planet Earth. and time immemorial. Was it 4.5 billion years ago? I have no idea. Was it 2 million years ago? Was it 200,000 years ago? I don't know. The Bible is very unclear on that. But Lucifer was in charge of protecting this planet. And so this planet had life, it had dinosaurs, it had Neanderthal man. I mean, science has proven all these things, right? And then Lucifer ultimately, as this creation is growing, and I'm just envisioning, his thoughts like, how look at what I've done. Look how beautiful this planet is. Look at these people. This is where you can start talking about evolution. Was Lucifer helping to manage evolution of mankind? Sure. Or no, I don't know. Doesn't matter. But you can certainly start having some thoughts about what did evolution look like if Lucifer was in charge of this planet and protecting it, from the mountain of God. So all this is going on, and ultimately, so Lucifer starts getting lifted up in pride. Right, we do know that. It talks about, again, it's Isaiah 28 and Ezekiel 14. We get in all these scriptures about Lucifer, and so he starts getting lifted up in pride, and he wants to be worshipped like God. So, I mean, we can read some of those scriptures, or you can just trust me on that. He says in Isaiah 14, he says, let's see, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. This is Lucifer. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So he wants to be above the stars of God. The stars of God tend to be the angels and all the different cherubs and all that different classes of spiritual beings. He wants to be above it all. So he starts getting lifted up in pride. And then, of course, we know from Revelation that a third of the angels fall and join Lucifer. So, I mean, it's hard to envision this, right? But Lucifer is in charge of the earth. He somehow gets a third of God's angels to come down and join with him. This leads us to the Nephilim ultimately, but maybe we'll do that another day.
Yeah.
So a third of the angels fall. We know that from Revelation. They join up with Lucifer, and somehow they lead a revolt against heaven. And we don't have too much detail on this, but we do know, the Bible's clear in the book of Hebrews that the blood of Jesus had to go all the way up to cleanse the mercy seat up in heaven. This battle did something pretty big, like all the way to the point of potentially corrupting heaven itself. Like something really bad went down that Jesus restored it all.
Yes.
Not just with us here on earth, but he also restored it up in heaven.
That's an overlooked passage in Hebrews.
Yeah.
And it even ties into the Old Testament belief. I would say the Catholic belief of purgatory, and could an Old Testament believer go to heaven? Well, absolutely not, because they didn't have the blood of Christ yet.
Exactly right.
And the blood of Christ in Hebrews says cleansed the heavens. It needed, so something happened.
Something definitely happened.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, did I say Isaiah? It's Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28. I think I may have said it backwards. I'm not sure. But just to be clear, it's Ezekiel 28, Isaiah 14 that talks about Lucifer. So something really bad went down. There was this huge battle.
I knew that. I didn't want to correct you.
Yeah, well, you should have.
I'm just kidding.
I don't even know if I said it wrong. Yeah. But anyways, so we do know that then ultimately this battle went down, and we know that, I'm not sure where it is in the New Testament, talks about how I saw Satan fall like a bolt of lightning back down the earth, right? So this battle went on. Lucifer, after this battle, after the defeat of Lucifer, he was sent back to earth. And I'm just guessing he had some kind of a covenant with God back when he was Lucifer to protect this planet, and so God doesn't break his covenant. So I'm envisioning that's why Lucifer's still here. Now he's Satan, but he'd already had this covenant, so he's allowed to stay here. Again, nobody quote me on that.
What we're getting to here, though, and it's important for me to pause, and the Bible doesn't give us the answer to every question that we have. It's not. I remember reading the Bible for the first time and thinking, okay, it's going to tell me everything, but it doesn't.
Yep.
Why is that in your opinion? Does God want you to not know certain things? Like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I guess for myself, the Bible tells us what's important for what God believes is important for us. It's about salvation. It's about Jesus. It's about the restoration of Eden, if you will, right? It's about all of that, and it's about morality and all these good things for our life. And these things are there. We can go research them ourselves and we can find answers, and it's okay. But I guess God just doesn't view them as that important. Because I'm sure we're going to get up to heaven someday and he's going to laugh and be like, oh, John,
There's
that was
so much more.
You were so close. No, John, you were a mile off. That was horrible, but good try anyways.
And it's okay to think, and it's okay to theorize, and it's actually an act of worship. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind. You know, it's a part of it. Like, think about the things, think deeply about the things of God. We run from thinking, we run from contemplation in today's world. We just want experience a lot of times.
So true.
You know?
Yep.
So I commend you for let's keep going, man.
Yeah,
Let's
so I
keep
just
rolling.
encourage everybody to listen, do your own research. Go to Ezekiel 28 and read it. And you're going to turn around and be like, hey, wait a minute, I thought this was talking about the king of Tyrus.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't talk about Lucifer. Then you're like, well, no, read on. It says, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Well, no earthly king was ever in Eden.
Right.
So it's clear we're talking about a different king. And you can get into it. You're like, well, then the Bible's talking about two things. Oh, yeah, there's this thing called the double meaning. And so there's so much research.
Interestingly, too, the tie-in between Revelation and Ezekiel 28 is the stones.
So fascinating.
We've talked about that, I think. But there's only maybe one stone that isn't similar in that. And, you know, who knows the reason why. But that is a tie to say, oh, no, this is actually talking about Eden. This is talking about
Absolutely.
you know, restoring Eden is the point of Revelation, you know?
Yeah.
Restores face to face. So this is good, John.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So Ezekiel 28, Isaiah 14. So we have this world of Lucifer. He had a throne. This is the one that I think might mess with some people's heads, but we're going to just go into it anyways, because again, it's quite biblical. If you want to pull up Genesis 1:28, I'm going to make the claim that there was mankind before Adam and Eve. And I know that was a sacred cow that some people may be like, who's this guy? Tell him to shut up. Like, why does Pastor Zach have this guy on? But if you want to go to Genesis.
I hope people feel that way, honestly, because not necessarily about you, but in general, I think that I'm not doing my job as a pastor if I'm not inspiring people to get into the Bible themselves, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's
I
go.
love it, man.
Well, let's do it. So let's go into just go into the New King James or go into the ESV. Doesn't matter. Just don't go in the King James. Okay, so Genesis 1:28 in the ESV, and God blessed them.
Why not the King James?
Because we're going to go there next.
Oh, okay. I got you. Okay.
Genesis 1:28 ESV, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. We're quite familiar with this. This is the creation story, right? Now change that over to Genesis 1:28 in the King James Version, and see if you can find the difference.
Oh, man, that's going to take me a second.
I know.
You have it pulled up yet? It might be quicker for you to... Go ahead, read it.
Well, I want to put you on the spot, see if you can find the difference.
All right, I got to pull up a different Bible
I'm
app.
kidding. I'll just speak it out loud. It's not fair because it's so small. Most
It's
people
so
don't
small.
even know it's there.
Oh, I want the challenge. I want the challenge now. I love that. All right, Genesis 1:28 we're looking at.
Yep, King James.
In the King James. All right, I'm almost there. Ooh, that's languages. They changed up the Bible app just recently. All right, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. There's the word replenish.
There it is, right there.
Yeah.
Most people don't even see it. They just read right over it.
Replenish the earth.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I got to look at that
in
the original
non-King
Greek, or
James,
the Hebrew. That's
so. Yeah, so I can tell you right there. So, the word is male.
okay.
Male is the word replenish, and it's used 249 times in the Bible, and only 7 times is it called replenish. So you got to. Some people will say, yeah, therefore it's wrong. It should just be fill. I look at it like if the King James, the Church of England translators, they spent all these years redoing this Bible and coming out with the King James Version. If they chose replenish only 7 times out of the 249 times it's used, they had a specific reason for using replenish.
Yeah.
And so, according to the King James Bible,
It should
the
be
earth needed
replenished.
to be refilled. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
So that would be. It just says fill in the English Standard Version, correct?
Yep. Most versions you're going to go and just say the word fill.
Okay. Well, what? Okay. So this word in the original Hebrew, can you help me out again with that? I'm opening my Bible word study on this.
Yep. Male.
Be full, consecrate as a priest, devote, fulfill, carry out, set, mount. To be full. So why would it be refill in some?
Well, when you look at like the Strong's Concordance, there's so many ways this particular word can be translated. This goes all over the place. Like you said, there's set, space, replenish, presume, furnish, gather, to be fenced in, expired. I mean, it's all over the map, right?
Yeah.
And so this is one of those words where you really have to be a Hebrew expert to understand why it's chosen as fill or even refill, why it's not to be fenced in. Like, I have no idea, right? This is where I just say, I don't know. I rely on others way before me who are way smarter than me.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting. When I have situations like this is no different than was in Genesis 1:2. Like, I don't know. You pros tell me it's became, great. I'm going to believe you, but I'm going to validate. Does the things around it, kind of like the Bible hermeneutics approach, do the things around it make sense? And so when I have 2 Peter shooting an arrow right between 1-2, the two things they talk about are exactly the same. Okay, now this makes sense to me. Like, I believe the word is, instead of was, it should be became or had become. Makes sense to me. On this one, I'm like, okay, well, almost every translation says fill, but the King James says refill in modern vernacular, right? It's a pretty big difference. So is there any other way in the Bible to kind of prove out that mankind existed before Adam and Eve? Well, we have scientific evidence all over the place, right? We got Neanderthal man, ancient man. There's all kind of stuff fossil-wise that we can say that makes sense. But it's interesting. If we want to shoot over to Jeremiah.
I mean, I have to pause because you look at this and you're saying the word replenish. I'm processing as I'm talking here. But you say the word replenish. Then it says the seventh day God rests. Then it goes into the creation of man and woman in Genesis chapter 2. This is talking about creating Adam and Eve as well in Genesis 2. So either way you look at this, there's the distinct possibility of two separate human races within the first two chapters of Genesis.
So when I first read it as a brand new Christian, I was so dang confused by Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 because of that exact situation. I'm like, God created mankind in the days of creation, and then we have Genesis 2, like now he's creating Adam and Eve. I was just so thoroughly confused by that. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this helps.
Yeah.
This helps to reconcile that.
Yeah.
You know, candidly, this is a question that I've been searching out for the last couple of years, and I don't know where I land on it.
Yeah.
You know,
so I still don't know where I land on it.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. These are big theological things, you know.
Yeah.
And, I don't know that we talked about this, and we probably should. Maybe it's a great place to talk about this right now. Like these things we're talking about today should not divide us as Christians.
Right.
Please, please, please don't let these divide us as Christians, right? They're super interesting conversations. I think what you said earlier, like God wants us to research and to go into the deeper things. And so I think it's a fantastic exercise. We should do it. But we should not divide over this. Like if somebody wants to believe in a young earth theory and I want to believe in an old earth theory, that's okay. Like we are not, please, Christians, let's not divide over these topics.
Right. The word heretical comes out it comes out of nowhere, right? This is heresy. Well, what is heresy? Like, you know, it's fascinating. Yeah. Like we all have to think the same things and believe the same things because somebody told us to. Like, no, we should be looking at the text, studying it, and seeking God with our questions. Yeah. And he actually likes that. He likes that a lot, I've found.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good.
So I think stepping back though, I think we really should talk about Jeremiah 4:23 right now. Because I think it lands like this question is it refill? Is it fill or is it replenish? Okay. You know, and I think Jeremiah helps get us there a little bit.
It's interesting because that's a reference in one of the verses that you used there. It's a reference. It pointed me there, so I was actually reading it while you were reading. So
Jeremiah 4:23 through 27. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. In the heavens, they had no light. Sounds quite interesting. Sounds just like Genesis 1:2, doesn't it?
Yep.
I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. Oh, you can see, okay, something's happening to the earth here. I beheld, and lo, there was no man. Oh, interesting, no men, no mankind. And all the birds of the heaven were fled, so the animals are gone. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate. Sounds again like that perished, right, from 2 Peter. If I love this part. Yet will I not make a full end. It means I'm going to remake this whole thing. You know what, Lucifer? You may have destroyed and corrupted that which is mine as creation, but we're going to redo it. And I view that as a Genesis 1-2 vision, if you will, for Jeremiah. I know there's others that believe otherwise, but when you see here there's no man, no birds, you can't say that's Noah's flood because there is men and there are birds. So what else is he talking about?
Wow. Okay. So very literally, no man. I don't know that I've ever focused on that. And it's good. It's good. I've never focused on that word. They had no light.
Yep. Yeah, no light. No God's presence. And then God in Genesis 1:3, let there be light.
Right. Like the word, you're convincing me here. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but, they had no light. Genesis 1:1, Genesis 1:2. I can't see that in the flood of Noah. I can't see that in Noah's flood. You're right. Wow. Yep. This is fascinating. I love this. That's so good.
Yep. So that's about it for the scriptural, God places these little breadcrumbs, right? And they're research breadcrumbs. Could I have it wrong? Absolutely. Could be right? Absolutely. I don't know. There's not much more that I can find in the Bible. There might be others more expert than me who could find some other scriptures, but these are the scriptures to me that at least lay out a path that says old earth, creationism, absolutely makes sense as long as you have that gap theory. And that gap theory means there was another flood. Well, the Bible proves out that there was 2 floods clearly with Psalm 104. And it leaves all the space for Lucifer and that entire kingdom to be ended by the great flood. So I can't take us on much more of a journey scripturally, but boy, it leaves you a lot to think about, doesn't it?
So it does. I got on this journey of asking. There was a man. I think it was. I might get the wrong guy. Fred Price, I think it was. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
He was South African, and he actually talked about demonology. Okay. I had an experience with. A lot of people don't talk about this in the church world, but this is the perfect place for it. But I had an experience with a demon possessed person, sure. And I had to take authority, and that person is fine now. It was real. This was not contrived. One of those moments you're like, okay,
what do I do here, Lord? Yeah.
And it got me thinking a lot about my theology of demons. Mm-hmm. And I hear Fred Price. I start to listen to him, and he's like, "What are demons? They are disembodied spirits of a pre-Adamic race." And I was like, what? He just breezed right by that. Yeah. I'm like, what's he talking about? There's this whole world I don't know about, that of theology that people believe, So, wow.
Yeah, we just cracked open the door a little bit to it. And it's actually funny because I used to think that same thing. And my thought on who demons are today has actually evolved. And I no longer believe that. It's, partially I believe that. But it's who is this pre-Adamic race, and I don't view it. I used to view that as like a early mankind, right, or
right,
Neanderthal man or whatever. And I don't believe that to be the case anymore. I do believe they are disembodied spirits of Nephilim.
I agree. I 100% agree on that. And this journey is actually watching and reading a lot of Dr. Michael Heiser. Mm-hmm. A lot of my friends who are deeply theological pastors, very good teachers, sign off on this man is an unbelievable researcher. Yeah. And he really was. I mean, Logos study tool that I'm using now, he was the one he wrote a ton for them. He just passed away recently, but after reading him quite a bit, he pushed me over the line there. And he talks about the heavenly council, which a lot of what you're talking about here lines right in line with, and he also, did you do any research in, the Talmud, the Dead Sea Scrolls, what was discovered there? Does this belief have any validation in those discoveries?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. No, I really can't talk about that. I know some of the research I've done on Talmud more about Nephilim, stuff, but no, as far as Dead Sea Scrolls stuff, I can't answer
even
that.
the first book, the book of First Enoch, because they...
Yeah, so certainly that one is relevant.
Yeah. Was there anything in that regarding this?
So when we get to the book of Enoch, I guess maybe we should step back to the question as to why was okay, so if Lucifer, if we're right, and there's this pre-Adamic world, right, full of animals and people, and as Jeremiah said, the people have cities, right, and Lucifer is kind of the ruler, protector of all this, right, and he starts to fall into sin of pride, right, and again, we're talking probably millions of years. I have no idea, but so imagine that sin getting worse and 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 worse, right, and so now you have this completely corrupted ruler of the earth. Are his subjects going to be like just perfectly happy, good? They're all moral creatures. Everybody's happy, but they just have this really bad ruler. Or are the subjects going to be corrupted too? Mm-hmm. Right. It's an interesting theological question. Because then why would God have to destroy? I mean, the cosmos perished, right? That's a big deal. Why did everything have to be wiped out? You start diving into that. Like, it's a good question, Lord. If the ruler is the bad guy, why did everything have to be wiped out?
Yeah.
Right? And so we look at Noah's flood. Why did all those people have to be wiped out? And Noah's flood. Well, we know that Noah, it says he was perfect in his generations. Well, Noah was not perfect. Only one person was ever perfect. That was Jesus Christ, right? So Noah was not perfect in how he lived. He was perfect in his DNA, right? So that's why Noah was saved. Basically, Satan got within one family of wiping out God's uncorrupted DNA, right?
Wow.
That's what it means by it says perfect in his generations. So if he was able to do, Satan was able to do that in this post-Adam and Eve, pre-Noah, in that time frame, right? Could he not have done the same thing in this pre-Adamic world where he was the ruler? He was the guy. In Adam and Eve to Noah, we have God. Right, but in that world, really the ruler. I mean, God was there, of course. I'm not kind of discount that, of course, but Lucifer was the person in charge. What would he have done to corrupt that cosmos?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so when you get to these conversations about Nephilim, so why was Noah's world destroyed? What happened to the DNA that corrupted mankind so badly that God had to wipe out everybody? What save one family? What happened in the pre-Adamic world where everything had to be wiped out? And the answer, I believe, are in fact the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. And so you really do need to go down there. If you want to get into this, like, why was that world destroyed? We have to talk about Nephilim. Mm-hmm. There's no other way to talk about it.
Yeah. So then God recreates the earth, right? Right. And when he does so, he creates Eden. This is where God meets man face to face.
Right.
Then we see the serpent tempt and pull.
Another reason why we know there had to be a pre-Adamic world was where did all this stuff from Ezekiel and Isaiah happen?
Right.
I asked that when I was brand new to my faith. I asked that to somebody who'd been a Christian for decades, and I asked that question. Well, where did Lucifer, all that stuff happen?
Yeah.
And you could just see like this confused look, glassy-eyed, like, I never thought of that.
Never thought of it. Yeah.
I'm like, well, there has to be a pre-Adamic world, like. Because in the beginning of the Bible, he's already in Eden.
Yeah.
It had to happen somewhere. Yeah. So.
Right. He's already in Eden.
Yeah.
And so did God. The question that has irked thinkers is, did God, God knew, obviously he's omnipotent, but in the same sense, why would he create and then just willingly subject Adam and Eve to that temptation without prepping them, warning them, et cetera? Mm-hmm. Do you know? What do you think about that? Like, where does your mind go?
Well, my mind goes that I'm probably wrong in everything I'm about to say. But my mind goes to love and choice. And like, so there's no true love without a choice. And if there's no, like, I think God wants a true love with us. He wants to be in love with us, and we want to be in love with him. And if there's no other way to go, then is it true love? Mm. And I think if you have this opportunity to say, here's going against that, and I choose to not do that, but instead stay in love with God, and then it's true love. And I'm sure I'm butchering this, but I think you get my point. Like, without a choice, we're more like robots. And so I do feel like, in a sense, I feel like there had to be a choice. We had to choose God or not God.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think was going on in there. And I'm sure I'm totally wrong.
No,
what's your answer? I think it'll be a lot more accurate than mine.
Well, in the context of this conversation, up until this point, I've always thought this was both the fall of Satan and the fall of Adam and Eve. And now I'm getting challenged in that belief.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that God created the earth for Adam and Eve to be fruitful, multiply, and then also say, okay, there's a hidden snake behind the door here. He's going to bite him at some point, and I'm just, I'm okay with that.
Let it happen.
So I had always thought, well, he fell at the same time as them. He said, I'm going to steal their most precious creation. I mean, think about it. You have a serpent talking to them, and they're fine with it.
Yeah.
Everything new everything's a discovery. It's like, oh, the serpents say it, they must talk,
Yep.
Interestingly. But with that being said, I always thought it was just a mutual falling at the same time, So now I've got to rethink that. Have you ever thought about that in regard to, no?
I can't say I ever have. I've always been, I never really understood. I just said, well, okay, Lucifer fell for some reason. Now I understand that in my theology why he fell. Now I at least have an answer to that. But I never, early in my never thought about that question.
Oh man, my mind is going a little too deep for, it's like, oh, was there another guardian cherub on the outside and, let him slip by? Like, was this created to, let him,
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And I go to, when it comes to Eden, like, it's like, well, we've never found a physical Eden, so it had to be like this physical, spiritual place. And we know there's an angel protecting, nobody can go in it anymore. So it's like, was it even on this earth? Because it's got to be a physical, but also spiritual place. That's the way I viewed it. Like, I've never really thought of it just as a physical place on this earth, because I've never seen an angel guarding there's a spot on the planet that we can't get into because there's an angel guarding it, right? So it's got to be some kind of spiritual place that we don't have access to, and it's just another one of my weird
it doesn't
thoughts.
like give an answer of did that angel leave and all of that, or is it the what is it the Pearl of the Sahara, I think it is, where it looks like a city has been sucked underneath the ground, and fascinating stuff. So you were an agnostic,
I was.
and you had studied, you said material science. Is that what you?
Yep, material science, engineering. Yeah,
engineering. Okay. And so whenever you came into the Christian world, looking at the 5,000, 6,000 year old Earth, you were just this is nonsense.
Yeah, I did. I think it was silly, but I knew the Bible wasn't silly. I knew God wasn't silly, and I had to figure it all out. And I knew it was me that had lack of knowledge. So I'll give you an example why this stuff's so important. Before I was a Christian, I had a party at the house or whatever, and there was 2 doors up, what you consider just a kind of a really nice guy, probably very liberal in his politics, science kind of guy. 3 doors up was another really wonderful guy who was just denominational, 6,000 years, that kind of guy. And the 2 of them were talking, and I kind of went up to talk to them, and they're in a debate over is the Earth 6,000 years old or not. And the Christians, like, flat out, it's 6,000 years old. And the science guys, no, it's not. You're a moron. And they just hit. And then eventually they separated, and not anger, but it was heated. And the liberal guy looked at me, he's like, these Christians are such morons, and I didn't want to be that guy when I became a Christian. I didn't want to think, hey, I'm a moron. I have to.
Were you a Christian at that point? I can't remember.
No, I was not.
Okay.
So I'm like, so when I did have this experience with God, and I'm like, and now I'm a Christian, like, I don't want to just have to bury my head in the sand and be like, well, I guess the Earth's 6,000 years old against all my thoughts and everything I've ever done, and against all the radiocarbon dating I've done, and it's all just, I guess I was all wrong. I just put my head in the sand, I had to find some answers. And why this topic today is important. We're not going to divide over this, right? But it is important because we are out in the world, and there are going to be people like my liberal neighbor, right, who do want answers. And if we can teach them about old Earth with a gap theory and prove these things out and say, yeah, we don't challenge anything that you believe, we agree with it, then that's good. And then we actually have a place to have a deeper conversation with that person. But if you're trying to have a conversation with an unbeliever and they think you're a complete moron, we got a problem. You're not going to make too many inroads in it. And that's why I do think this is kind of an important topic.
Yeah.
We really should. Not all of us are called to have this conversation in front of everybody. I get it. But
even the ability to be open in a conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, we do get very dogmatic as Christians.
Oh my gosh, we sure do.
Well, we know this is exactly what it says. And I did the math and I saw that on a meme somewhere,
That's right.
on my fridge. therefore it's true.
Yeah.
But really it just lines up with what we want to be true.
Yeah.
Because out of convenience, I don't know what it is. Laziness sometimes, honestly,
Yeah.
rather than challenging what. But there's actually historical documentation for many beliefs that the modern church is like, we're a little scared of that.
Yeah.
The history of it has been around for a long time. So I'm sure that you're not the first one to think about this gap theory.
Oh gosh, no.
Right?
No, it's been around for a long time, as we're discovering.
Dake probably, he didn't think that of it on his own even, right?
No, I think Dake was more of the Lucifer's flood side of it. The gap theory, I think, has been around for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I'm discovering it.
What do you think is the earliest documentation you found of it?
I think late 1800s. But I didn't go much deeper. I mean, I'm sure if we really studied, we'd probably even find older than that, I would imagine. But
I would love to see what the ancient Israelites believed and more of that, because essentially, when we talk about Peter, he did read the book of First Enoch. He refers to it.
Yeah.
Also the Epistle of Moses and some other,
Jude, right in our own Bible talks straight from the book of Enoch.
Yeah, right. And this is the context of their belief system of their world, you know. So it's fascinating.
There's a line from that book, from the book of Enoch. Maybe I'll just share real quick, because it's interesting. We were talking about, why was that pre-Adamic world wiped out? How was it corrupted? And I said the answer is, the Nephilim. But I think you'll get a kick out of this. This is this book of Enoch would be that time frame from Adam and Eve to Noah. We're not talking about the pre-Adamic world, right? But listen to this. He's talking about the Nephilim. These Nephilim devoured all the toil of men until men were unable to sustain them, started to run out of food. And the giants turned against them in order to devour men. So now the Nephilim turned against mankind itself. Their own mothers and fathers, they turned against them, started eating them. And then it goes on. And they began to sin against the birds and against the animals and against the reptiles and against the fish. And they devoured one another's flesh and drank the blood from it. If that doesn't sound like corruption.
Right.
Of everything, the entire cosmos, right? Every animal, every reptile, every fish, everything's being corrupted by these Nephilim. It's not clear on how. I think we can all, when DNA gets corrupted, I think we can all have an idea of what might have been happening with the Nephilim, especially when we get to Genesis 6, and the sons of God saw daughters of men, and they were, what was it? Sons of God came down to daughters of men, saw that they were
like desirable,
whatever the word is, and started having sexual relations with them, right? And that's where the Nephilim were birthed from. So it's quite possible that might be going on here with the Nephilim. I'm going to leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that's how all this corruption was
the whole
occurring.
earth had become violent.
Yeah,
right. That's the reason.
Yep. So there you go. So so I now would envision what's this? How did Lucifer get a third of the angels to fall to join him? So the Bible talks about that a little bit. It talks about his merchandising, trafficking. So, what does that mean? I don't know. I have my own personal thoughts. Maybe we'll just leave it in my own personal thoughts.
Give your personal thoughts. This is the platform for it. I would love to hear. The multitude of merchandising is abundance of trade, right?
Yeah, maybe we should read it. Where is that?
Ezekiel 28, right? Not Ezekiel 14.
Here, by the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. So, what is
There's the word violence again.
Yeah. So I personally believe when you look at sex trafficking and how it's just so evil, and it's been going on since the dawn of time, and we know from Genesis 6 that the angels fell down to have sexual relations with women. I firmly believe that Lucifer was using the appeal to these angelic beings in heaven. Hey, come down here. You're going to have sexual relations with a pre-Adamic. I do this both pre-Adamic and post.
Oh my goodness!
They are coming down, having relations with these women, right, and creating these Nephilim in the process. That's what I believe merchandising looks like. I mean, look at the world. We've never stopped merchandising women, young girls, young boys. We've never stopped that merchandising. Why would it be any different back then?
I'm not expecting you to answer this question, but you might be able to. Was it Abimelech? He murdered I think Abimelech was the first sex trafficker
Yeah.
in the Bible. I mean, that's early parts of Genesis, right? And he thinks, oh, well, it's totally fine. I can murder anybody I want because God avenged Cain, so he'll avenge me.
Yeah.
He protected Cain, so he'll protect me, right? But I'm pretty sure he was he had multiple women he was pushing around, basically, the original Hebrew talks about, which is fascinating to me. So that tie-in of that's before the flood as well.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. Like, how would Lucifer, before Adam and Eve ever existed, before Lucifer's flood in this pre-Adamic world, how would he get a third of God's angels to join him? They're in heaven.
Right.
Why would they want to leave their first estate, as the Bible calls it? Why would they leave their first estate and join up with him?
My goodness, yeah.
On earth? The ability to create life that they don't have. Angels aren't forming children, right? God forms them. They don't have relations and create little baby angels. But if they come down to earth and have relations with earthly women, they can.
Yeah.
And in that process, you're creating this half spirit, half human Nephilim. And if we really want to get theologically interesting, when that Nephilim dies...
Right. This is what convinced me, asking that what happens.
Where does it go?
Yeah.
Does hell exist before Adam and Eve? There was no spirit-filled creature up to that point. God breathed his life into Adam and Eve. He never did in the pre-Adamic world. It never says anything about him breathing life into any creature. So did hell exist before Adam and Eve? Did hell exist before Lucifer's flood? We don't know.
I don't think so, based off of the New Testament account of Jesus saying that hell was created for those fallen angels.
Exactly right.
And
Tartarus.
so, yeah.
Yep, exactly right. So if hell didn't exist prior to Adam and Eve, but now we have this corruption that was never supposed to be, this Nephilim corruption that's half spirit, half man, right? It dies. Where's it going?
And that's where my theology of demonization came in.
There. Yep, exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can see this world. So you have this pre-Adamic world. You have angels. Again, this is just John's assumption, right? So please, I don't know if this is right, but angels falling down, likely having relations with women, birthing Nephilim. These are like Neanderthal women, whatever you want to call them. Having relations with them, birthing Nephilim. We just read from the Book of Enoch what they do. They corrupt everything they touch, animals, reptiles, birds, right? They corrupt it all. So you've got that, and your leader, Lucifer, is completely fallen in sin, right? He's the father of lies, right? He's the leader. That world is going to get corrupted real quick. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think Lucifer's flood, that cosmos had to perish, because I think it was just completely corrupted by those Nephilim and by Lucifer bringing down those angels, and God's like, that's it. This place... The cup of iniquity is full. We're wiping this all out. He wipes it all out in Lucifer's flood, and we start over again in the creation story of Genesis, recreation story of Genesis.
Well, it makes a lot more sense that God started over after the earth had been. It makes a lot more sense to me. I can't even put words to it, but just with the original account of creation, Genesis chapter 2, and then the fall of man. Fascinating to me.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And I'll just close with God said he creates things to be inhabited. I forget where I thought I had that scripture down here, but he wants things inhabited. He doesn't create it just be empty.
Yeah.
He creates his creation for life.
Yeah.
And so after all that destruction, he had to start over again.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is good. Where can people read more about this, study more about this?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I put together, there's a lot of different resources that kind of came up with my viewpoint on this. So I would say there's a great book called As It Was in the Days of Noah by Dr. Richards, who we talked about earlier. It's a fantastic book. I would really encourage people to go to read that. And then honestly, if you can
I've read a couple of his works, and I've sat under his teaching, and I love that man. I love that man.
Yep.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Yeah, he really loves God, and he really thinks things through.
Yeah,
I mean, his book about being called to ministry that he wrote when he was on a mission trip. I think he wrote it in 48 hours. I've given that book away probably 100 times. So it was as it was in the days of Noah.
Yeah, it's called As It Was in the Days of Noah.
Okay.
And it's gonna tackle the Nephilim. It's gonna go to Genesis 6. It's gonna talk about the sons of God coming down, having relations with daughters of men, and yeah, it's gonna get into all that. But it's not just. I mean, it's a wonderful theological book, but that's just a piece of it. So it's As It Was in the Days of Noah. It's a great resource. And then if anybody can get their hands on Dake's study notes, like it links up to the King James, so that's a little tougher to read, but you can buy it. I have a software package called Word Search that I use, and it links directly to the Dake Study Bible, and all his notes are in there, and they're fantastic. I'm not saying he's right on everything, but they say you got to be as wise as an old cow, eat the hay and spit out the sticks.
Eat the hay, spit out the sticks,
Yep.
or eat the watermelon, spit out the seeds.
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Right. So
I think there's a couple theological works that are fantastic, but then the people ended up going crazy later in life, and you're like, oh man, what? I mean, not even some of the hymns that we sing. Yeah. So we have to be careful. That's why, I remember even saying about one person who fell in ministry, like, this is the guy that I can endorse. He's not going, and then he did. And I'm like, oh man.
I'll dive into that one for anybody who does the research. So Finis Dake, the reason he wrote this thing, because he was in prison. He was in prison because he took a young girl across state lines.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely one of those eat the hay, spit out the stick stuff. So,
oh yeah.
Oh man. It's right
Definitely.
There. But,
one of the best works on the original Greek, the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, was written by a guy named Gerard Kittle. And Kittle was brainwashed by Hitler later in his life.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And he spent the rest of his life, after he created this brilliant theological work, he spent the rest of his work trying to prove that the Jews weren't God's chosen people.
Oh, man. Dangerous territory.
It really is. It's crazy. It's crazy, and it shows you, like, I mean, God uses imperfect people all over the place for genius work. So, man, thank you so much for causing my mind to spin a little bit and giving me more to chew on. I hope it helps some people today. And
me too.
Specifically, I'm thinking about some people who are on the fringe of Christianity right now. People who are thinking, oh no, these Christians, like your friend, these Christians are, they're brain dead. Whatever your friend said, they don't think things through. It's probably refreshing to hear. There's people who are open to reason, open to thought in areas, and we're not so dogmatic all the time.
Exactly right.
It's
okay to say I don't know sometimes.
Yeah. It absolutely is, and it's okay to have a theory, right?
Yep.
I think the Bible. I think the Bible's written in such a way that you have to theorize about some things, and God likes that. So thanks for being with us today, John.
It's my pleasure.
This was great, man. We'll do it again.
A lot of fun. Yep.
Yeah, buddy.